Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 26 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Karl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, by my colleague, lead cloud engineer, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
I'm okay. Generally can't complain. I do need to fix my kitchen tap. I thought I might have to last week, and the leak has gotten worse. So I need to fix my tap. I need to buy a new tap.
You do have a lot of issues with taps. So we have spoken about plumbing on the podcast more often than we should have done, to be fair, given that it's an AWS News podcast. But what's wrong with the kitchen tap then?
So this one, it's monoblock, mixer, big spout. It's leaking out the top of the monoblock. So
it's not a cartridge.
No, I've changed the cartridges already on that, on both sides. I just need to buy a new tap. Just need to get on with it.
The nuclear option. Well, there we go. So moving on from taps, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Igor Soroko, fellow AWS community builder. How are you doing today, Igor?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me. It's amazing to be here one more time.
Another repeat guest. Great to have you back. But for the listeners who didn't hear the first episode, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do for a living, Igor.
Yeah, now I'm based in Spain, Buenos Dias. I'm learning some Spanish, of course, because it's fun and very rewarding experience to learn something other than just TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, these kind of things. I'm a software consultant working with various clients in the cloud, and my interests are in between DevSecOps, Serverless, and AWS. Also, event-driven architectures are my thing. I have been recently to do two AWS community days in different parts of the Europe. It was fun actually to meet really and greet different people I follow, for example, and people from the community and from AWS as well.
And were you speaking at any of those events, or were you there as an attendee?
Yeah, I have been speaking to AWS community days in Warsaw and Switzerland. This was really fun. I really recommend going to one of these events. As well, I have been to Event-Driven Architecture Day of AWS in London, actually. It was cool.
Yeah, we didn't go to that one, did we, John?
No. We kind of found out about it like the week before it was going to happen, and it was like, oh, I really kind of wanted to go to that, but it was like several £100 for a ticket, and we had about a week's notice, and really busy with
diary clashes,
stuff that pays money, and it was a shame because we've got a guy coming to our user group that spoke at EDA Day as well, and that should be quite good. So.
Yeah, it was really fun because it was like something in between of big conference and meetup, and as well the quality of the content was like really astonishing. And also I enjoyed building serverless espresso. This was really fun in the workshop, doing step functions and finally doing ClickOps, and don't blame myself that I'm really doing it, like just clicking step functions. I think it's called a workflow designer. So it's an amazing thing actually in terms of UI. I really enjoyed using it.
Nice. And a quick question. You said you're living in Barcelona. You're learning Spanish. Are you learning in Catalan?
Yesterday I have this problem actually. Yesterday I have been to the shop where they sell cheese, meat, and all delicacies products, and two old ladies, they said to me, do you know how to say something in Spanish, but they asked in Catalan, and I say, okay, I know just how to say the cheese, and that's fine. That's all I know. But yeah, sometimes it's really funny, but people are speaking Spanish, of course. But this kind of things are really interesting. You live here, you think you understand everything because you're learning more Spanish, but all the signs, they would be in Catalan. So it's always an adventure to distinguish. And I think people who are coming to Barcelona for like tourists, they don't like understand this. But when you're living here, you think, okay, I'm going to other parts of Spain. There will be Spanish, and there will be everything written in Spanish, and you say, wow, this is how it looks like in Spanish. But here, like all traffic signs or traffic warnings, they all in Catalan.
Yep. So you got to learn both languages at the same time. Anyway, we're not here to talk about taps or Catalan. We are here, regular listeners
what
to the
about
podcast.
Catalonian taps?
Catalonian taps.
Don't start
is
this.
tap, but yeah, we ought to move on with the what the podcast is supposed to be about, which is of course AWS news. So as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter, and then John and I, together with our guests, pick a subset of those articles that we'd like to talk to you about on the podcast. So we have such a selection of articles to talk to you about this week, and of course, the first one is more of a feature announcement, really. And this one is all about GuardDuty. So Amazon GuardDuty EC2 runtime monitoring now supports Ubuntu and Debian operating systems. So, John, you're the so-called GuardDuty expert on this episode. So what's exciting about this one for you?
Steady, lad. Steady. I've got to get this out of my head, and then I'm going to start a new podcast called a Tapcast, because I think I have to. So, right, GuardDuty. Plumcast. I think Plumbase might be annoyed at me for that one. Right, GuardDuty, runtime monitoring. So GuardDuty runtime monitoring came out a few months ago now, but it only supported Amazon Linux 3 or 2023 or whatever the latest version was. It only supported that because that's just kind of the one that they did first, and that kind of makes sense. It's an Amazon product. It goes with an Amazon OS because it's the one that they've done first. And you think, okay, cool. What's it doing? Well, I mean, the announcement back then said it, and it's saying it again. It's things like responding to potential threats in instances or self-managed containers with things like suspicious network activity, IP address querying, crypto mining, Tor network, Tor relay installs, and that kind of thing. It's really handy. It's useful because these are all sorts of things that you absolutely don't want to happen in your environment without you knowing about it. You might genuinely be mining crypto in your AWS account, in which case you're being a bit of an idiot because you can't make any money doing it. And the only way of making money mining crypto is to get someone else to pay for it for you. So you kind of want to know about these things. That's great. We like this. It was only on Amazon Linux to start with, and now it's just been expanded to Ubuntu and Debian. It kind of makes sense that it's Ubuntu and Debian next because Ubuntu is, I think, one of the most used Linux distros going, mostly because Red Hat just obliterated anybody's choices for using CentOS. But let's not talk about that right now. And, you know, Ubuntu is based on Debian, so it kind of makes sense that it does Debian as well because it will just be the same package. It will just work in the same way. And it's Ubuntu 20 and 22 and Debian 11 and 12, which are kind of like the same things effectively at the same kind of kernels and sort of all the rest of it. This is good. We like this. We like this a lot. I think it still uses the existing. Security agent because great, wonderful, great. So there's a new agent to install if you're not already using it, which you won't be because it's new. Free trial for the first 30 days, which is great. Go use it. Go install it. It doesn't fully replace things like on-host posture management, antivirus, endpoint protection, if that's something that you need. But it's a very good step to centralizing all of those things within GuardDuty.
Igor, I know this is not really your area, but did you have anything to add to John's comments, sir?
Yeah, first of all, I'm not so deep into this. That's why I was even Googling the eBPF security agent. What is it? Which is actually quite cool that you can extend the capabilities of the kernel at the runtime and you don't need to change any source code, which is, I think, amazing. What I feel about it is kind of, as I understand, kind of parallel process running in the background. But interesting thing, I have read some documentation about this GuardDuty EC2 runtime monitoring. That you can use tags to put the correct EC2 instances for using this monitoring. I think it's perfect. So you can exclude and include your instances by just using tags. And I think it's perfect, actually, because I feel that this kind of thing looks like you don't need to create some kind of AWS config. You don't need like a SSM for this. You just use tags which are predefined and they are readable by the AWS. So I think it's pretty cool that this thing is actually helping. But like just the one thing, so they say about free trial, so there is additional pricing into this. So are you paying for GuardDuty?
Yeah, so you pay for
monitoring?
GuardDuty. You pay for GuardDuty itself anyway, right? That's not free. Most things aren't free. And in terms of this, there is an extra fee for using it. I don't have the pricing in front of me, but there is an extra fee for using it. It's nice that you get a 30-day free trial, so you can kind of see how it works without spending any money. I don't think it's vastly expensive because nothing ever really is. It'll be a few bucks a month. I don't have the pricing in front of me, but I wouldn't be worried about the pricing for something like this because any kind of external third-party AV or endpoint protection is going to run you a few bucks a month per node, typically. No, we've got experience with a few of them, and they're kind of £4 or £5 sterling per month per node. So I wouldn't worry too much about how much this is going to cost because it's not going to cost a lot.
I'll tell you how much it's going to cost because by the power of my fingers doing a quick Google search, I have found the pricing for runtime monitoring. It depends what runtimes you're monitoring. So CC2, the first 500 vCPUs per month are $1.50 per vCPU. And then the price drops as if you want to monitor more than 500 vCPUs. And in fact, that is the same across all runtimes. I'm looking here. So EKS and ECS runtimes, they all have the same pricing model. So $1.50 per vCPU for the first 500. And then the next 4,500, it drops in half to 75 cents. And if you've got over 5,000 vCPUs, it's 25 cents per vCPU.
It's an old-fashioned sort of model, but it's an old-fashioned sort of problem. It's here's how many CPUs that you care about, and if you've got a large fleet of small instances or a small fleet of big instances, you're going to pay similar numbers. But that's not big amounts of money.
Nope.
I think it's quite fair, to be honest, because you basically pay for somebody not to use your workloads for malicious stuff. I think that's always perfect. And as I have seen with my experience, some really third-party agents and stuff like that, they cost a lot, and they also consume lots of your data. I don't know. It's it's a good thing that AWS is working continuously on doing it natively, these kind of things, and automatically. It's important to say that it's quite easy to set up, as I understand, right?
Yeah, it's not too bad at all.
Cool. Well, we like that. So on that note, let's move along to the next article for this week. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Igor, because this is one that you picked out. So this is another new feature announcement about AWS Lambda, which has introduced new controls to make it easier to search, filter, and aggregate Lambda function logs. So what grabbed your attention about this one, Igor?
I have been working with Lambda since 2020, all the time. Before that, I have been trying it with some small functions, like doing small things, reporting your status of the GitHub PR, for example. But what's important is always logging was a problem kind of thing that before this introduction, before making Lambda function logs in JSON format, it was only plain text. And it was always a problem that you need to choose the library for that. You in Node.js, there can be 5 different libraries, and you need to set up them and everything. But I think in this case, you can do it natively with just simple setup, because now I can choose between the format of the logs between JSON and plain text. And I think you don't need to bring your own logging libraries if you don't want to, because sometimes Lambda suggests a small pile of code you're doing in Terraform code, for example, which is not the best thing, but still you do kind of inline function, or it's a small thing to do. You don't want to introduce a big library. So I think it's cool because now you can introduce the logging level as well. So log level can be error, debug, info, whatever. And what's cool about that also, that they support it in I think Python, Java, and Node. And in Node, for example, in Node.js, you can use just the console object, which is the most obvious, simplest solution ever. And also you can get like what I have read in the article, because they also put the launch blog post there. You can go and check the format, and the format is really good because it has also some metadata as well. You can aggregate, search whatever you want. And yeah, also what's an interesting thing there, they haven't put it into this announcement, but in blog post you can find that you can put custom log group to aggregate logs from different lambdas, which is I think also quite a good addition, because mainly when your lambdas are just single function thing, so you're doing just single operation thing, it's important not to like pollute all the CloudWatch log streams and log groups, creating them endlessly. Before that, you cannot do this, and it's interesting, this kind of small thing, and we have not got it since 2016 or however when Lambda was introduced. So I think they are going into the direction that they are hearing the clients, hearing what really people want. Maybe developer advocates helped with this or somebody else, but I think it's pretty logical to have this. So what do you think? Have you got any experience with the logging?
Yeah, Lambda logging is awful. Lambda logging is until this was awful. I mean, the famous kind of metric that they put out, not on the log, is 90% of AWS innovation is in response to customer feedback, and 10% is net new innovation. Lambda itself was net new. They came up with that as an idea because if you previously said, I want to be able to run things with less fuss, they go, okay, well, we'll just automate server deployments and things. It's the old, if you'd asked people in the 1800s what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. Like, what do we want? We want logs to be less awful. This makes it less awful. Brilliant.
Yeah, and the thing is that you can choose it on in terms of your environments as well, because, for example, they give you the opportunity to change the log level in system level and in application level. So, I mean, it's amazing, because also this start end is also polluting the logs, and always a problem to remove them, or I mean, it's always kind of thing. You need aggregation, you need monitoring, and also I think now you can add also custom metrics on top of that. So it's pretty cool that with this JSON format you can do it without different parsing. So yeah, it helps really, because now I can do console.debug or console.log and don't worry.
Without having to write that whole thing yourself.
Yeah, writing my whole thing, or debating with the team, especially like in enterprise level clients, we need to debate which is good, which is safe, this kind of thing. But everyone will be happy. Like in Java it would be log4j, I think. In Python there would be something different. So it's a good thing for the developers as well. They don't need to make so many changes to be honest. They to adopt this.
Nice. So now that we know that Lambda logging is no longer horrible, you might be thinking you wish to refactor your application to serverless. And funnily enough, that's what the next article is all about this week. This is an article from the AWS DevOps blog, Refactoring to Serverless from Application to Automation. And John, I'll come to you first on this one. What are your thoughts around this? I know you're a big fan of serverless.
Yeah, I mean, I picked this because of the author on this, not Sindhu Pillai. I can't read.
Gregor Hope.
But yes, because he did a talk at a user group that I went to, and I was very taken by it. It was this whole, in that talk, he kind of similar sort of concept. It was rather than infrastructure as code or infrastructure from code, it was architecture as actual code. And what really sort of struck me was, writing CloudFormation is the same as writing assembly. Actually, it is. Yes, actually, it is, because you're writing it right at that lowest possible level. And we have these sort of abstractions, and you wouldn't think about writing assembly code. You just write Python or whatever. At the minute with cloud deployments and things, you still kind of have to do lots of legwork and say, well, I need this component and this one needs to talk to that component, and these all need to be here and that needs to live over there, and it needs this amount of memory allocation and kind of all that kind of thing. And we're gradually moving to a world where everything is kind of abstracted up several layers. And the thing that this article kind of speaks to me in that really awful way of saying, serverless isn't a runtime, it's an architecture. Fundamentally, yes, it is. It used to be serverless. People think serverless, you think Lambda, because that's sort of the first thing that did it. But there's a whole raft of other things that aren't Lambda that are serverless. There's all the queuing, like the first ever Amazon AWS service was SQS. That was serverless. Like the first ever one was serverless. So they've been doing this since the year dot. But there's whole heaps of things in there that are not server-based services that you can build the entire architecture, and it's brilliant. I love this so much.
Let's not talk about the services that are called serverless that are not, though. That's a slightly different debate. But
yeah.
That's
a whole different opportunity to have a podcast or any kind of discussion. Yeah.
Is it serverless or not?
Yes.
Serverless or not serverless? I can see a quiz coming up on that, actually, John. That's an idea for
that's not a bad idea, actually. Yeah. It's not a bad idea at all. I mean,
is this serverless? Is this service that's called serverless or not?
Actually serverless.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to say, but
quite presciently, the particular diagram on this one, every single service in there is actually serverless.
Yep.
Under my definition of scales to zero, it is actually serverless. So spot on. Yeah, no complaints. And it goes on to talk about things like improving applications with automation and just stuff that we've been talking about forever anyway. And great.
I wanted to add here that I really like that they try to put this term serverless refactoring, and it's about basically replacing application code with equivalent automation code. That's amazing. They formulated it so well. You just cannot add it. They just need to put new slogan for this kind of thing for serverless, because this is the easy, digestible thing for all developers. And I think they are manifesting many things in this article. One of them is really good, that they say the development team should be responsible for the application code and for application-specific automation, because it's always, again, a debate. Do you need DevOps team? Do you need admins, cloud specialists, this kind of thing to do your application and to support it with many things? But for example, when we have this diagram, when they are putting like API gateway, Lambda, DynamoDB, and event bridge, for example, and some other things, I think it's important that the team knows how to do this, and the team does it really, and they have an opportunity to do it in CDK or Pulumi, for example. Maybe I noticed developers don't like too much of a Terraform, but it's also, again, the whole different debate about using Terraform or CDK for Terraform. So here I would say that it's a great article. I think they are producing really nice as I said, manifesto about serverless, and Lambdas were introduced in 2014 actually, and this was a revolution by itself. But now they are building on top of this. But there is one thought which I got after reading this, that they say that serverless isn't a runtime. It's an architecture, and I think they don't want to use event-driven architecture for some reason. And maybe this is because it's too much about Kafka and Confluent. I'm not sure. It's just
you can have a serverless architecture without it being event-driven.
Yes, but what they put here, they put event bridge, they put SQS. It's already event-driven stuff. So
that is event-driven. That is absolutely event-driven. There's a thing happening over here and stuff happens. It can be serverless without being event-driven, but event-driven tends to be serverless.
Yep. Especially nowadays, when you don't need to run your containers, to run your connectors to Kafka producers and consumers, stuff like that.
Cool. Well, we like that article, and if you'd like to read it, check the show notes. There's links to all the articles that we're talking about in the podcast this week. But let's skip along to the next one, moving along from serverless to databases. Ooh, databases.
Still not serverless. Still not, even with Aurora serverless, it's not serverless.
You know how to connect the dots, you know, like to put it after serverless. Let's talk about something which they claim to be serverless, but it's not actually.
It actually isn't, yeah. But that's not the point of the article. This is an article from the AWS database blog, which is entitled Use Amazon Aurora Global Database to Build Resilient Multi-Region Applications. And we do get asked from time to time by customers who do think that they might wish to have a resilient multi-region application. Then they find out the cost of running that and usually decide that they don't need it. But if you do need it, here's a way you can do it using Aurora. So thoughts on this one, John?
Yeah, so I'm a fan of Aurora Global Database. I always get it mixed in my head with DynamoDB Global Tables and Aurora Global Database, but they kind of do the same thing, just for their own services. What you've got with Aurora, with my teeth in my face, with Aurora Global Database, is you have a secondary region that is a read instance typically, because what it's doing, it just kind of sets it off over there. It will do write forwarding now as well, which is brilliant. So it can actually be properly independent instances, and it will read, replicate, and it will write forward, and it will, keep itself in sync. So you've got this full hot DR setup in this particular instance, which means that if you lose a whole region, your other one is already there. Great, but you're not paying for just hot for DR. You've also got this brilliant setup where people can be directed through things like geolocation and weighted policies in your DNS to where their local endpoint is. And then you can run infrastructure in, say, London and Ohio or North Virginia, or you can run something in Cape Town and North Virginia, which is even further apart, and your local users will have good response times for them because you've done your geolocation policies properly, and they're talking to their kind of local instances. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That's a brilliant way to do things. It's just expensive because what you're doing is you're sitting there running up two versions of everything, and maybe you don't have enough users in Cape Town, for instance, or for wherever, to warrant having a full setup for 5% of your user base, and maybe something else is more appropriate, and then they can just kind of have a slow write time because CloudFront is a thing. But I like this generally. This is quite a nice reason for using it, because there's the two obvious ones is DR and for full local regionalization, if your application can cope without having large amounts of localization work, or if you've done the localization work and it'll kind of work out, oh, I'm running over here, I need to put it in Afrikaans or whatever. But I like this. I like this a lot. The engineering under the covers from AWS to get this to work is mind-boggling, because even read replicas cross-region is hard. This is mind-bogglingly difficult. So big props to the engineering team that have done this. I like this. I like this a lot.
Before I come to Igor for comment, I just wanted to ask the question, John. If one of your DR regions is in London, can it still be classed as hot, given the weather that we get in London? It's maybe hot, warm, maybe,
Hot, damp.
Yeah, hot, moist. Anyway, Igor, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's amazing that there are these global databases, and DynamoDB has the same, and now Aurora introducing it. I think also what I really like about this particular article is the way how they present the solution and how they showed the way how it's done with step functions, and they use serverless actually. They use lambdas for that, and step functions as well. And I think it's cool how they showcase the whole thing, and they show also VPC endpoints as well. I mean, these kind of things are also creating the way how we do it as a standard way of thinking of doing. So they are kind of setting up the standard, and I think it's also good that they show the best practices of how to do it in a small project. So from my side, I think it's quite quality written content, I would say. Very practical and very understandable for a wide audience, even if I'm not using too often the Aurora, for example.
Nice. Cool. Well, on that note, and conscious of time, let's skip on to our final article for this week, which is an article from the AWS security blog about the new AWS European Sovereign Cloud, which I believe is being built in Germany. And this is an announcement of the initial services that are going to be available in that European Sovereign Cloud when it launches. So thoughts on this one? Igor, I'll come to you because John has a mouthful of water.
I think it's pretty cool that AWS is making this happen, the sovereign cloud. I haven't been too often working with the government organizations, but I know from my history of work with Finnish healthcare, I know that it could be a mess to get all the possible certifications and the standards done, and where's your data and everything like that. And I think that's cool that AWS is doing this. The amount of services they are trying to launch is astonishing. So they are saying now that they would put the most obvious ones, which is pretty good. I think they have EKS, ECS. You have an alternative for containers. You have EC2 lambdas as well. The interesting thing that they put Amazon Q, Amazon Bedrock. I think now all the content related to help on some healthcare providers, and not only healthcare, but state providers would be much better, because it depends on the country, but usually this kind of search inside the website could be a problem for creating knowledge bases. I think it's pretty cool. Of course, the KMS, S3, all kind of these things, and VPC, of course. I think that's good. You can start with this to build something and prototype of something, but I'm a little bit concerned about physical security. So they should be really hidden well. I think that physically all these kind of centers, data centers, and where do they put them, which is interesting.
Stick them under the European Parliament.
Yeah, maybe that's good, or underground,
in a Swiss bunker.
Yeah,
there's lots of those.
Amazing. Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, this is functionally the same as the US GovCloud, but for the EU. Great, fine. There's a need for that. If you'd asked me 5 years ago about data sovereignty and data residency, I'd have told you to go to hell. Like, who cares? But now it's absolutely a thing. It really is a thing, which is annoying as hell. But there we go. It's nice that we're getting the list of here's what we're expecting to get from day one, because I've never worked with GovCloud, and AWS's own advice is don't use GovCloud unless you have to use GovCloud, because it's got this really restricted kind of set of things that you can do with it. Good to see that we're getting a good kind of breadth of services here. Nice to see that Bedrock's included from day one. I do wonder if we're going to have the same issue with model rollouts into Sovereign Cloud that we've seen just generally, because model rollouts have been just weird. They've been kind of, it's available in Oregon and only in Oregon, even though Bedrock's in a bunch of other regions as well, but not all the models are in the same places. So I wonder if we're going to have that kind of problem. But I do genuinely expect this to be the same kind of logic as with GovCloud, is don't use it unless you have to. If you have a use case for using it, we're going to make it as good as we can. But if you are just a commercial entity, you're not government, you don't have these really stringent requirements, and just generally your data residency can be accommodated by only working in an region, just do that, because it makes your life a lot easier.
And it is quite an impressive list of services for the initial rollout, as Igor alluded to. But is there anything that you would have expected to see on there that's obviously missing?
No, not really, which is kind of surprising, because you usually sort of get these kind of lists and think, where's CloudWatch or something like that, But no, it's kind of there. There's not anything that I personally use. I'm re-skimming the list now and I'm talking for cover. There's not anything in that list that I personally use on a day-to-day basis that isn't there. And there's a bunch of stuff in there as well that's kind of that I don't use regularly. So bearing in mind that the majority of AWS's revenue comes from EC2, they're going to make sure that the core of EC2 is going to be covered, and then it's kind of all of the extra fluff around the edges. And all of the extra fluff around the edges is kind of there. It sort of makes sense. It's here's what we're going to do from day one. It makes sense.
Nice. Well, day one, I believe, is at some point in 2025. I don't think they've committed to an actual date yet, but watch this space. 2025 will come around very quickly. But on that note, that is all we have time for season 3, episode 26 of Logicast, which was actually our 80th recorded episode. We ought to mention that. And yeah, John, you can mark it with an Apple reaction. I think is the official name for that ridiculous graphics going on your screen at the moment. Yeah, that was season 3, episode 26, but actually our 80th published episode of Logicast. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you, John, as always, for your insights. Thank you, Igor, for joining us again as our guest. It's been great to have you back on and to hear your insights as well. Don't forget, you can download the Logicast podcast from wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to see John with a mouthful of water and his crazy Apple reactions, you can also watch the podcast on YouTube. We'll be back next week with another episode for you. In the meantime, thanks for listening.